So let's be clear. All right. So when I talk 20,000 on Bitcoin, you have to understand that I always said it had to come with a deleveraging event, right? So deleveraging where there's so much margin in the system, so much money being borrowed to buy Bitcoin, to buy stocks. And it's always been key to understand that it has to coincide with the stock market decline. If you'll notice what we've seen lately, right? We've seen Bitcoin collapsing here. Here's the chart of Bitcoin coming down significantly from those highs. And what's going on in the stock market? You're starting to see panic and deleveraging. So this is the type of environment that you could see a move down to 20,000, but please understand that you have to see the full deleveraging in the stock market occur. So again, that's very important. It's got to coincide with it. I still personally believe it will happen. David, you know, when we were in Dubai, I talked about how the market in Bitcoin looked like a double top to me. Everyone was screaming it was going to go to 100,000. I said, I don't trust it. It's still technically on a 4-year cycle. And here we are from 68,000 down to about 48 to 49,000.
Something I've learned from speaking to people in the crypto space is that Bitcoin typically is driven by sentiment more than technological innovations. And so we've seen the Taproot upgrade come out a few weeks ago, and that did nothing to boost the price. We've seen continuous developments in the DeFi space, layer 2 protocols being added, doing nothing to breach new all-time highs. So what's the sentiment right now on Bitcoin? Because that seems to be the core driver of Bitcoin, not cryptos at large, but just Bitcoin is sentiment.
Yeah, so you're 100% right. And I still remember being in Dubai, the ETF was just launching. There was so much hype. If you went on social media, all you heard about was the crazy, moves in Bitcoin, how it was going to go so high so quickly. And to be honest, that was one of the things that I kind of coined off of to be a little bit more on the cautious side. And one of the things I'd point out, if you look at the Bitcoin chart here was your April high, right? And if you draw a trend line over, notice how you pierced it on 2 separate occasions here and here. And each time it got sold into. If there's that much bullish sentiment in the average investor, why didn't it surge higher? And the answer is it didn't surge higher because there were bigger players unloading there. And you have to pay attention to this stuff. So yes, it made a higher high here and here, but also you have to recognize that it failed. It failed any sort of breakout. And again, you've come down significantly. So you're right. Fear and greed rule the markets in the short term. People have always said, why don't you look at on-chain analysis? That's so important for Bitcoin and crypto. And the answer is, in the short term, I'm a swing trader. In the short term, that doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is greed and fear. And what we've seen lately is fear starting to swoop in. That's going to be the predominant force in Bitcoin until it flips.
Is that sentiment stabilizing? Are we seeing slightly less fear now as of Monday morning than maybe a week ago, Gareth?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got to show you guys this stuff here. So some cool stuff. So number one, I'm a swing trader. And I want to make that clear before I say this statement, because this doesn't mean I'm a long-term investor yet in Bitcoin. But I did buy Bitcoin, all right, just right around 48,500. The reason I did it is there's a key trend line here. All right, look at this that we hit, right? So you have a beautiful trend line there. Notice the pierce right there. And you also have some other factors on the Bitcoin chart that gave it extra support right here as well. So in the short term, you actually hit support. I'm expecting a bounce back to about 52,000, maybe 53,000 over the next week or so. And then I'll honestly look to probably take profits on my swing trade at that point. But again, it did hit support. I do think you're due for a small technical bounce. Ultimately, my issue is that you still have too much leverage in the system. The stock market, I still think, has to go lower before it bottoms out, and that inevitably will affect cryptocurrency prices, and they will come lower as well.
Why would the stock market affect cryptocurrencies? What's the relationship there?
Well, the issue here is, this all goes back to the Federal Reserve, right? And the Fed has pumped in so much liquidity into the market, made money essentially free with interest rates near zero. And that creates this sense of you can always borrow money, just keep leveraging. Asset prices will always go up and away. And so what happens is people in the stock market take leverage. People in the crypto market take even more leverage. When you have a sharp drawdown in the stock market, there's a portion where you're going to get margin calls and margin selling. And what happens is people don't like to sell their stocks. So what they do is they say, okay, well, I don't want to sell my Apple stock or this stock because it's dropped so much. Instead, let me go sell some crypto. Let me move that money over to this account. And you create this kind of deleveraging event. The other side is also fear, right? So you have fear, and fear is very pervasive. If it's in the stock market, inevitably it's going to bleed into cryptocurrency.
Interesting. So The two are trading concurrently
Yeah.
as risk assets. I'd like to clarify the downside target for you now, because you said that you bought a little bit at $48,000. Is that the floor for you then? Or do you think that should the stock markets, and we'll talk about the S&P 500 and NASDAQ soon, but should the stock markets taper down even lower, will that bring Bitcoin down to, I'm going to bring up $20,000 again. Is that still your downside target?
Keep bringing it up, because eventually it will happen. And by the way, again, I always have to say this, but remember, folks, I love Bitcoin. I'm a long-term bull, but I'm also a realist. All right. And a realist means that you have to face the music sometimes. And honestly, it's just a good place to buy. So yes, ultimately, I'm looking for this as a swing trade. I'm going to unload around 52, 53,000 when Bitcoin gets back there. And then I do expect further downside as the deleveraging occurs, as the Fed worries more and more about tightening and tapering and kind of monitoring inflation. They're going to have to tighten monetary supply here. I just like to point this out. This is a really interesting point. You really saw Jerome Powell do a 180 flip in terms of his kind of chatter, right? So we saw him so dovish, always giving the markets what he wanted. Then what happens? He gets reappointed to be the Fed chair by President Biden. Now we know that the midterms are coming up, right, in 2022. So if you just put the dots and connect them, you can clearly see that Biden probably said, hey, listen, Jerome Powell, I'll reappoint you, but I need you to deal with inflation. Why? Because a huge amount of Democratic voters are the middle income and lower income people who are getting hurt the most by inflation. So there's a little bit of a kind of, it's not a surprise to me that he's getting a little bit more hawkish on inflation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's go back to the technicals. Can you pull up the Bitcoin chart one more time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just keep that time frame. Can you pull up an S&P 500 chart with the exact same time frame? I guess that's since March.
Here's the S&P chart right here.
March, okay. Not a perfect correlation, but since the summertime, they've sort of moved in tandem.
Yeah.
We've seen a dip in around July, August for both charts. It's climbed back up, peaked around mid-November, and they've both come down.
Yeah.
I just find that an interesting observation.
And that kind of goes along with the deleveraging, when you see the stock market decline and the fear kind of creep in. So I think if you get to 428 on the spiders, you likely go test the 40,000 level on Bitcoin. Let me bring up the Bitcoin chart again. So one of the levels I'm following on Bitcoin, there's a couple levels from when we rallied off 30,000. So if you look right here, there's a pivot high, pivot high, pivot high, and then we broke out. So that would be your new level right here to look at. So that would be your downside 40,000. And I think that would kind of coincide with that 428 to 430 level on the spiders. If we break below that, then the whole new game plan comes this low, which is at 30,000. That would be your next level to watch. So again, these are your next two levels. You've already hit this area, which is good support, and it's holding thus far. We're actually back above 49,000. So we'll have to see if my trade ends up working out. But again, if you go lower in the S&P, eventually you'll get to 40,000, then 30,000. And, hate to say it to people that are really just overly bullish, but I do think 20,000 is still in the cards. But again, folks, let me reiterate, it has to coincide with a big deleveraging. And when I say big deleveraging, I'm talking like 30 to 50% in the stock market. You'll get Bitcoin below 20,000.
Okay. And to clarify, you did say that should Bitcoin hold its previous all-time high, 70,000 is the next level, right? So why haven't we seen 70,000 yet? Because I guess we didn't hold the previous all-time high long enough.
Yeah, so this is really important. This is what I call the confirmation signal. So you have this is the April high right here. Notice how you closed one day above it here and then reversed, and then you closed one day above it, never closed above that high. So the confirmation signal, this is a signal I created. It's very accurate in determining what's a true breakout versus a fake breakout. And so when you close above it, you need one of the subsequent candles to close above the high of that breakout candle. In neither situation that happened. To me, that's telling me you have institutions or big money or whales unloading into it, and it's likely a fake breakout, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
I think I'm just reading the comments from our previous interviews. People are concerned about the exact levels. Right? You're calling 30,000, 20,000. It doesn't really matter. I think the key is the direction that you're predicting. So
short term, a little bit of a bounce, right? I'm long Bitcoin right here. I'll go on record and say that. And next time we're on, I'll let you know if I ended up. But if it gets to 52, 53,000, just assume I'm out. And then ultimately, I think it rolls over again down to 40,000. bounces there, I'll probably look to be a quick buyer there for a swing trade. But again, the stepping stone down is what I'm anticipating.